Thanks. Thank you so much. So hi everybody. Yeah, I was thinking about it that my world, my professional world is now um, uh, it contain two types of meetings: people with legs and people without legs. Um, and it's kind of weird to move between those two realms. Um, to build on the tradition we already have uh, that we meet, and then for some reason Nikki trusts me with improvisation. I'm going to do something similar. So I'll just say a few words about myself, and then how I imagine this conversation, and you just gonna I'm gonna try and read your facial expressions and see if it can work or not. Um, so my name is Erez. I work for a company called SIT, Systematic Inventive Thinking. Um, it's one of the first companies in the world who's focusing on innovation from many different aspects, innovation and creativity. And I've been doing that for almost 20 years. My background is many years in education, mostly in two areas. One, in developing and facilitating educational programs in every application. So it could be academic, but it could also be behavioral or environmental or conflict resolution, etc. Developing the programs and facilitating them. And the other track that I pursue was what we call, I don't know how you call it where you're coming from, but here we call it humanistic education. It's all this genre of democratic schools, open schools, etc. So I've been doing that for many years. And then I stopped and I completely changed, and I spent a little more than 10 years in the high-tech industry, mostly around system management, mostly around ASIC design or chip design, these types of technologies. And when I had enough, I joined SIT and I fell in love, and this is what I do. So um, what I thought for today, because I was clueless about this meeting, I thought that I'll just share with you what I have on my desk these days. Um, and we can pick up and choose each topic, or if you have questions, that could be a good starter. If you have a story to share or an opinion to air, that will be perfect too. I'm sure I have a lot to learn from you guys. So I thought that, so if it's okay with you, let me just go through the menu, and then you choose your meal or your course. Okay. So in terms of projects, projects for us are assignments that are there to create results. So not any other type of assignment. So I have few of them. I have 5 that I'm now continuously juggling in between. The first one is working with a very large medical device company um, on trying to understand how do you shift both technologically but also conceptually from electronical and mechanical devices into data supported devices. Anything from monitoring equipment to I don't know, an operation theater, everything that is in between. So this is one project, and it's really interesting because on one hand, the constraints are very clear. Everything needs to be available and empirically proven and clinically proven and engineeringly safe, etc., and FDA approved on one hand. On the other hand, there's such a chaos of options and terms and technologies, and some of it is really fascinating, but completely not relevant for the next 10 years. Some of it doesn't sound impressive at first, but then you dive in and you realize that, wow, this could save so many lives just instantly. So that's one project, one assignment that I have. I'm also working with an organization uh, that train managers for the public sectors, different type of management roles within the public sector. And the problem that we're trying to solve together is, following the COVID-19 pandemic, how do you rebuild trust?
Mhm.
Okay. And again, you have very limited resources. Some of these organizations are either service-oriented agencies or nonprofit organizations. So you kind of have to reinvent new ways of doing that. The third one is working with an organization, a charity organization, who focuses on education and prevention of child accidents at home and near home. It's a very old organization. I remember, I just suddenly remembered that I was volunteering there 25 years ago as a volunteer, and now kind of in a roundabout way, the economy, they came up with an amazing program for municipalities. Not only that it's a brilliant program, the cost for the municipality is close to nothing, okay, literally close to nothing. Yet municipalities are not lining up to enroll to this program. And you ask yourself why? So this is a problem that it's interesting to first explore the problem, then the solutions. And in terms of the solutions, we need to come up with both a business plan, or I say business plan, but what I imagine are maybe a new set of incentives, as well as a marketing strategy for that. So this is kind of a whole different area of innovation. We also started, again, about a year ago when COVID was here already, we started an executive ed program here at SIT for managers, people who don't necessarily need to be the ones who come up with the idea, but they need to understand a little bit more about innovation so they can call the right shots. So it's kind of a very short program. We get to meet, much like this tour, we get to meet, between 5 to 10 individuals, each one from a different part of the world doing something else. And it's just a brilliant conversation. And the last assignment that I have is actually connecting to Sarah in a way. We noticed that many of our clients called us in the last 18 months to help with the lack of events and conferences and learning programs, etc., because of COVID and because of that Zoom fatigue that we have, or PowerPoint poisoning that we all suffer from. And it's time for new solutions. Now, when I say new solutions, there are two groups of solutions. One are the more pedagogical solutions, more related to long and meaningful processes of learning. And that's not what we're doing here. I mean, we do these kinds of projects, but not with this specific setting or context. This is more about how can you still create events or conferences or learning, short-term learning programs that will be very different than trying to imitate physical reality. And what happened is that, looking back, we conducted so many successful programs like this, and for each program you invent or develop something new, that when looking back, you realize that you accumulated some kind of a large bucket of new exercises and methods and content that could be applied. And what I do these days is I first of all collect everything, and then before we're thinking how to share it, sell it, publish it, I want to look at it from more of an analytical point of view, and see if I can identify some innovation principles or innovation patterns there, to see if we can kind of add some kind of a meta-analysis or meta knowledge from all these I don't know, ideas and changes and new configurations. So that's what's on my desk. In addition to that, I try to kickstart a new idea that I have that I called Sit and Think. Sit, double meaning with SIT. But the idea is that for me, it's a very interesting discussion with people I worked with the past, because they know where I'm coming from. They know something about innovation. They know usually more than one set of tools. And the idea was to take half an hour from a normal team meeting or a normal department meeting. Let's take half an hour. The participants will pick a topic and I will facilitate a conversation around it. It could be innovation related, it could be not. But for me, what's interesting here is I'm very interested about the way people think. More specifically, I'm more interested in understanding how people think when they need to solve problems and when they need to invent something new. So the cognitive and behavioral aspects of that specific type of thinking. And one of the things that I thought would be really interesting to facilitate those, improvised discussions when the focus is on the thinking process of the participants and not necessarily the knowledge. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that, but I'm trying to create maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 opportunities to experiment with that and see if they're, if it's useful or not. In addition to that, I'm trying to finish an article about the new model we developed in the last 2 years. I think Nikki already know about it. One of the things that we realized in the last 5-10 years is that, somebody said once that devices become smaller, but our fingers stays the same size. When it comes to cognitive processes, or more specifically decision-making, when you compare the number of variables that a manager need to consider before they make a decision now, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, you very clearly see that it's more complicated to make decisions now. Not only that, the different outcomes from each of those decisions could be varied. And we're still using the same cognitive mechanisms and the same thinking processes, and it doesn't work anymore. And one of the things that we realize is that maybe what we need to do now is to think together with others, which is something that we never learn how to do. Okay, we never learn how to think. I don't recall anyone replying positively to the question if they remember the day on 8th grade or 9th grade when the teacher walked into the classroom, say, today, children, we're going to learn how to think, right? Luckily, we're smart, we're motivated, we're committed, we're accountable. So we do a pretty good job. But without, for most people, with not many skills. So, so that's when you think alone. Thinking together with someone else or with more people is way more complicated. And when you look at the world of decision making in the last, again, 5-10 years, you see that there are more and more think tanks. And when I discovered that, I got curious. I said, okay, how these think tanks work? And what I found out is that there's no good working model for think tanks. There are 2 or 3 systems or concepts or tool sets, and they're all about managing the process. They contribute nothing to the quality of the outcomes. And when I complained about it to my boss here at SIT, he immediately replied with, so do something about it. So in the last 2 years, we developed a work model for think tanks. And it took 2 years because we wanted to create something very simple, something that you don't need to invest a lot of time and money to acquire. We wanted to be based on existing, well-known public domain, which means free, and empirically proven tools, existing thinking tools. So there was a lot of work on curating, see what works with what and why and how. And then we ran a large-scale experiment. We had 15 think tanks around the world, taking different assignments or different thinking assignments. And we were able to compare the results. We had some control groups. So it was very successful. And for me, the next exciting thing that I really hope that will happen is that we'll be able to sell it. We'll be able to share it with the world. So this is another thing that I'm very passionate about. And the last thing that is very fresh from today is that I decided that I want to find an easy and quick way to start collecting innovation related questions. I meet a lot of people who are in some way or another involved with innovation, and I'm really curious to know what are the big questions for them. Okay. So just as a side note, if during this conversation or after this meeting, you feel like sending me an email with questions that you think that will be really interesting for you to know the answer for, I would love it. So that's what's on my desk. That was a really long monologue, and now it's all back to you. Questions, comments, suggestions. You go.
I'm opening up the floor. I love the menu. I have my thoughts, but I'd like to hear from you. What resonates the most? Sarah, want to jump in?
For me, it was, I don't know if it was the second or the third one, the one with the building trust. Now, how building trust after the pandemic. I really find that interesting because I think it's, yeah, we are confronted with that like every day now. How can we build the trust of our clients? How our teams can trust again? Like, I think it's a very actual topic. And also the last ones that you mentioned about the whole thinking project. No, how do people think, and about the innovative ideas. I also like to deepen a bit. Basically, it's these two topics that really catch my attention. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Marcus, what do you think?
What a great use of language. What do I think? I don't know how to think. So the reality for me is that, so Erez, you may not know, but for a little while I was at EY, and I helped put together the merger of Ernst & Winnie and Arthur Young to create EY.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And the
it's
funny thing
about, moment, yeah.
Sorry?
It's an important moment.
Yeah, it was. And
yeah, can you undo it?
Oh God, what a complete disaster it was. But now, you know, I still deal with a lot of people at EY, and they still invite me to give talks to them and everything else. And the reality is that there are 250,000 people in EY, 250,000 people who have lost the ability to actually think. And when I ask my colleague partners, and I say, do you enjoy working here? Most of them go, no fucking way. I say, why do you do it? Where else could I earn $1 million a year? And I say, but you are giving up your entire life, hating what you're doing, in order that at some point you can accumulate enough money to do something else, which is taking the gamble on how long will you live, which is an extraordinary thing. So the work which I now do, and I'm so interested in this because, you know, I work with kids, and I work with 100,000 bloody kids. And in general, everything at school is the same as it is with EY. It's here's the model, here's how you learn it, here's how we test whether you can do it correctly, and here we can innovate by maybe changing a full stop to a comma. Wow, you know? And somehow we are, I think, by accident, that's why I'm so interested in the work that you're doing, because I think by accident we are building basically people who just do what they're told to do by people who also do what they're told to do. And when you go back and say, who the hell started this? It's very hard to find it. Very hard. So I'm intrigued, really intrigued.
Can I share a story to kind of build on your point? So some 18 years ago, when my son was 5-year-old, he was attending what we call here a democratic school, an open school. And I was invited, as many of the other parents, to sit in for kind of a lecture that the school organized for the parents. So most of the people there were young parents, and the topic of the evening was what are the absolute necessary skills that a child needs to acquire in the education system between the ages of 5 to 7. Okay, and it was organized as a panel. So in the panel there was somebody from the Ministry of Education, a superintendent. There was a principal from just a normal school. There was a woman who was a principal of an radically open school. There was a student from that same school. And then there was the principal of a democratic school somewhere. So the question was presented to each of the panel members, and they answered each in their turn. So the superintendent said, well, in these ages, it's absolutely mandatory that children will acquire the following. Communication skills, meaning language and reading and writing. I don't know how you say it in English. Quantifiable thinking, like math and I don't know what's the word, arithmetic skills, and social skills. This is what they need to learn. Then the principal of the normal school obviously repeated the same mantra. The open school principal said, kids do not need to acquire anything. It's not our role to teach. Our only role is, as grown-ups, is to provide stimulation. And they should follow their own curiosity. The student said something completely different. No, school should not even create stimulation. It's up to us. It's supposed to come organically. So each one of them gave their kind of very clear point of view. And then the last lady who spoke was the principal of the democratic school. And she said that in her school, there are two things that children must learn in these ages. And if they fail to learn that, it means that we as a school failed. And the way she articulated that message was kind of very, very strong, very tough. You don't expect that from someone who comes from kind of a, very liberal education. And people got like, what? And she said the two things that we must teach kids as parents and as teachers in this age are, one, we need to teach them how to choose and not what to choose. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is that we need to teach them how to handle frustration. Mm-hmm. Because without these two things, you cannot enable any proper learning abilities in the future. And I remember that moment because it changes what I thought about education. It's, for me, this is like the Holy Grail. So I think in that sense, Marcus, that the shift that we need to make is towards these two elements, behavioral and selection criteria, or how to build considerations and prioritization, and not what to choose.
It's a shame that we have to teach them how to deal with frustration. It'd be much nicer.
It's human nature. It's human nature. I think it's yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I
great. Thank you.
I hijacked the conversation.
No, it was a good
Neil, Johan, what do you guys have to say?
Well, I actually, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. So this is a bit like stepping out of this very technical subjects in education and going a bit, like higher level to learn how to learn and how to unlearn. And I clearly can see that this is something I lacked, during my early education, and I had to kind of do it myself later on. So I went into many jobs, and I realized I don't like it. So why I don't like it? And asking those a bit higher level questions, I think, is what makes an educational system successful. So, teaching the students or kids these kind of higher level thinking. Now, coming back to the early points, my question is a bit, maybe might seem a bit stupid, but I'm a bit curious. Why do you think, firstly, that trust was lost during COVID?
So first of all, it's not about what I think. This came from the client. They said that one of the comments that they get a lot from their trainees. It's a training program, long training programs, is that they feel that they lost trust with the field. So for me, that's a given. I did some work with them trying to, it's weird to say, but to define trust, or what specific type of trust are we looking at here? And the definition that the working definition that we agreed on for this specific assignment, so I'm sure that there are others that are more appropriate for other situations, was that trust in this case is to convey the promise, or convey the promise that that the next time you need us will be answered with the right response. Okay, I need to know now that the next time that I need you, you will be able to respond appropriately. So it's that exception.
But isn't this a more general kind of issue? Like, what I still don't get is, how is this linked to COVID? Maybe somebody can give some examples.
Imagine that you're an organization that help people going through, I don't know, tough financial times, or complicated medical needs, or you could be a charity, or you can be a government agency. And when COVID hits and there was curfew, everything was locked down, there was no service. You were not there for them when they needed you.
I get it. I get it. Okay.
Imagine that you're an organization that develop, I don't know, educational materials. You're a company, a business that supply some specific services to other businesses, and you can deliver. So
I see. Okay, I see.
Trust.
Niall.
Yeah. Well, this is great. This is great stuff, Erez, and everyone. I think the theme that's coming through is about, for me, it's around the metacognition, and that I think it was the fifth point you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So I think several of the people in the room have said that. And Johan, you mentioned unlearning, and I think these are highly linked. As is the point around the events and the learning programs that you were talking about, Erez, as well. The moving from the physical reality with what are the patterns? I think these are all very, very strongly linked, at least in my mind, based on my very limited understanding of the descriptions. And it is around, it's so important, I think, nowadays to understand how we think. And you're right, we never have learned that. And leaders in business, and my areas tend to be more in the sort of corporate sector, probably like yours, and larger organizations. There are so many assumptions are made that we have to challenge now, as individuals, as leaders, as citizens. We have to challenge some of those assumptions, which I think implies there's a great opportunity to think about, well, how do we think? How do we, what are the assumptions that we're making, and how can we challenge those points? So I think there's a lot of connections between what you described there, but yeah, the metacognition in particular is one that interests me.
So I think in that sense, there are a few thoughts that I can share. One is that working with this medical device company, one of the projects that I was involved with is the OR of the future. So how operating theaters and operating procedures would look 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. And we talk about AI and deep learning and machine learning and all these exciting terms, and you try and figure out what what is useful and what is not, and what is a buzz and what is not. And at some point, I realized that I work with the smartest people in that specific field. Yet when they think of an operating room, they take it for granted that it has walls. Okay, and for me, this is automatically raise a red flag. It's called in our world, it's called structural fixedness, our tendency to perceive things in the same way. So it's not about which technology will get in there. It's being able to imagine a wall-less operating theater or a floorless one. Now, maybe it sounds stupid now, and it's probably stupid, but it's a good example of how deep that cognitive bias that we have runs in. So same goes for business model innovation. Same goes for, training. So we have those assumptions that some of them are what we call the acquired fixedness. It's everything that we picked up along the way. And those are sometimes easier to recognize and sometimes easier to overcome. And then there's another group or another family of fixedness called cognitive fixedness. And it's a type of fixedness that we're born with. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. We all have that. And it's actually a really good thing. I wouldn't want to live one day in my life without it. But when it comes to invent something or create, solve something creatively, it gets in the way and we're not aware of it. One cannot be aware of one's own fixedness. It doesn't matter how much, I don't know, jogging or meditation you do, or how many books you read, or how many brainstorming sessions you run. It's the way the brain is wired. And the only way to overcome that type of fixedness is by very specific external manipulations. In other words, you need something or someone to force you to look at it. You cannot do it on your own. So for me, this is fascinating because the minute you overcome that cognitive bias, now you can imagine so many great ideas that and of course, the smarter you are, the more educated you are, the more senior you are, the more of an expert you are, the more experience you have, the more fixated you are. So many times it breaks my heart to meet an organization and say, look, we can't solve this problem. We got our best brains. We put them, we locked them in a room for 5 hours and even they couldn't solve it. Duh. You're taking the most fixated people in your organization. You expect them to, what do you call it? Think out of the box? What the hell does it mean? So I think that one thing is what we are born with, and we need to learn ways to manage the thinking processes and overcome fixedness, or overcome cognitive bias. The other thing is that we need to acquire some skills and tools. Most of them are free and easy to use, easy to apply. Okay, but we don't do that. We don't do that. We just stick to what makes sense to us and what we're already used to, and that's it. So I think for me, I'm interested in those specific abilities to be able to identify the situation and pick the right tool set or the right approach or the right cognitive manipulations or whatever you want to call it that will make because asking people to think differently is insulting. Usually when I hear someone make that statement, I ask them to show me how. And usually I get that embarrassed smile because it's a figure of speech. It means nothing. When somebody says, think out of the box, I ask them to show me how. It means nothing. Cognitively, I mean. Yes, sir.
Erez, it's quite dangerous sometimes. I found this at EY when I find this all over the place. When I'm talking to people, I'm trying to help them work out what are the barriers which they set themselves. A lot of people get very nervous because invariably what happens is people start thinking a little bit, and that thinking is, what the hell am I doing here? and I quite like it. you know, when people leave. So when people leave and do something else, then I know that to some extent that's worked.
And that's a luxury that I don't have. I need to make sure we'll have results. But for me, look, from my experience, people don't like it when you tell them what to think. People hate it when you tell them how to think. So if I look at the work that I do running those thinking sessions, I think that about 50% of the energy is directed towards dealing with resistance. Now, this is also kind of a tricky situation because some of the resistance is well justified. You know, some of the ideas are really bad, or some experience that people bring forward is very relevant. You can't just wave it and say, "Oh, you're too close-minded," or no. So you have to be able to, talking about trust, gain their trust and have them allow you to hold the rings really tight and lead them through that thinking process. So no, I don't like it when they leave. For me, it means that I failed.
So here's what I tend to try to focus on, that if you're going to stay in your organization, it should be a conscious decision to stay rather than the conscious decision to leave. So most people only make their decision when they go, I hate this place, I'm out of here. And the default is to stay. And I try. So every organization I've ever founded, I say to people, look, you can work anywhere. If you're going to stay here, it should be a conscious decision to stay, not a subconscious decision, because then every moment you are questioning whether this is the right place for you, and collectively we'll get better. The worst is when you have a collection of people who are just robotically going through this until it gets so bad they leave, instead of making change happen whilst they're there. Now,
I think it's true to other aspects of life, not only work.
But I'm intrigued as how you balance getting people to, or helping people open their eyes, and yet not open their eyes and go, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah, I agree.
How do you do that?
I think that the way I would approach it is by trying to link maybe three sets of elements. Okay, I would start by asking people to list what is important for them. Okay, no priorities, no, just values. So that's the first list. The second list is what are they're good at in terms of skills and abilities and talents and experience and expertise, etc. And the third one will be a list of criteria. Okay? And for me, everything that supports your values, rely on your abilities and pass the filters that you created in your list of criteria is worthy. You know, it doesn't need to be one thing. It could be exactly what I'm doing now, but maybe if I'll learn something new, I'll do the same job just differently, or within the same organization, I'll move somewhere, or I'll stay in the same company, but I'll start a new hobby. I don't know. But for me, it's kind of a nice dance between those three elements. So it's just a thought. I'm not sure that I'll be proud of this answer in an hour from now, but that's what I'm thinking. Nikki, just a quick question. We have 10 more minutes, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we have a cut at in 11 minutes.
So can I take advantage of this respectable forum and try and promote my own interests?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm asking you to take a few seconds and try and write down 3, 4, 5 questions in the world of innovation that you would love to have answers to. It could be something very specific, like should we swap between measure and analyze in the lean process? Or it could be something as wide and open as in what define a culture of innovation? Anything. Yeah. So 3, 4, 5 questions, anything to do with innovation.
And you want us to ask them right away?
I want to ask, yeah, let people finish writing, and then if you want to share maybe one at the time, so you can choose which question you want to ask and which not, it'd be great.
I have 2 to share where others are still writing if you want me to go ahead.
Let's give them 20 more seconds, just so people don't have to multitask.
Sure. Okay, Marcus is typing it in. So I'll type it in as well, and you can pick which one you'd like to take.
I rather you ask it with your own voice.
Yeah, but
okay?
You can choose which one you'd like to hear.
Yeah. No, you choose. Okay, let's start.
So my first question was, let's start with Marcus' first question. Marcus, go ahead, ask your question.
Okay, so I met a guy and he said he was a great innovator, a great inventor, and he was working on how to improve the biodegradability of landmines.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I called him an asshole.
How do you find them then to change? Okay, great. Thank you. More. Who's next?
My question is, what is the anatomy of experiences?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, next.
So what I'm about to type is, where do we translate from outside, so outsource innovation, to inside, being innovative from inside of the organization?
So there's an assumption there that it's either or.
Yes, because I think that when I work, so here's my personal experience, that most of these exponential organization thoughts that I bring into organizations are way too disruptive for the team. There is a natural immune system against change inside of organizations, and there is no time for incremental change. We have to allow radical change, and radical change within the organization is a high risk. Right? Organizations that fit around the pizza don't risk anything because they don't have a client already, so they can't lose any client. But organizations with 500,000 employees, their risk is at high stake. Yep. So what you do is you outsource experiment, for example. That's what I offer to organization. You let me do the experiment, because if it doesn't work, nothing happened. And if it works, everyone in your organization wants to do it as well. Yep. Right? I've designed intrinsic motivation to adapt to change because they've seen a success story. And everyone wants to be part of a success story, but no one wants to be part of a failure story, right? Yeah. So basically, I outsource the risk of failure to implement the benefit of a success, because the experiment is still on the shoulders of the organization without the risk disrupting the team in the organization. And that's why I'm offering to the organizations to outsource experiment. And we've been doing this for one client, and it's really successful because they didn't risk anything. They didn't spend a lot of money. They got a lot of data, and they know what to do. Yeah. And you can outsource communication channels, you can outsource product developments, you can outsource processes, right? You can outsource a lot of things. Probably 80% of what's happening inside of the organization you can outsource, and it's important that the experiment doesn't take longer than 2 or 3 weeks, because otherwise too much time has passed by and status quo isn't true anymore, right? Hypothesis is too far away from where we are today. The question is, so if you agree to what I'm saying, is when do we start being innovative from inside? Because I've seen a lot of shadow organization concepts not work.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear more questions.
Marcus, you put another one.
Oh, I've got one that we all know, or we all suspect, that the path which we're following is one of potential harm to our planet. I don't think it's anything which people don't suspect is going on with the amount of pollution, the amount of waste, the amount of stuff. And yet collectively, we're doing almost nothing.
That's a statement. And the question is?
The question is, how do we move that, and how do we innovate in such a way is that we all pull along, I suppose, and go to the next stage, which may be to abandon some of the fixednesses which we all have, which is make product, make more product, dispose of it, throw it out, make more product, which is our basic economic model at the moment.
Thank you. Sarah, Al, Michelle, Johan?
I have a specific question, and it's coming up more and more actually, which is around, it's quite specific around culture of innovation, but it's about how you measure the return on investments in building an innovation culture.
We call it ROI, return on innovation.
Yeah.
There's actually quite few good studies. I think that one of them I have handy. If you send me an email, I'll be happy to reply with that. But just to tell you what it say, it's actually an older one. But basically, the study was trying to answer to the three questions. One, where do companies across the board invest most of their innovation efforts? Where do they get most of their return? And where do they get their return the fastest? Okay, so most companies invest their innovation efforts around products and performances. The highest return on innovation is business model innovation, not process innovation, not product innovation, not technology innovation. You get the highest return and the lowest risk with business model innovation. And the answer to the question, where do you get the return the fastest, was also around business model innovation. Yet you look at the business of innovation today, and you see that still most consultants still consult on products and services and technologies, and most efforts are there, and it's ridiculous. Anyways, so that's one answer, but there are different ways to measure it, and I think that one of the questions that that all innovation managers or leaders hate is exactly that. How do you measure success? No one wants to be measured by it. Yeah. So this is why you see people combining innovation and R&D, combining innovation and process excellence or continuous improvement. Okay, you move from paper to Excel, and you call it digitalization. Okay, sorry. Michelle, Johan, Sarah.
I was wondering, like, if there's a time limit on innovation, on the definition, because, for example, last year in my industry, when you started to do virtual events, this was an innovation. Today, it's already not an innovation anymore because everyone is doing it. So it's a little bit like, no, for how long does this innovation last? No, or for how long is it an innovation? And then it's no, it's then it's already not adapted to the reality.
So I think that innovation has a time tag attached to it. Something that is innovative is innovative when it's being created, not when it's being replicated or copied. Or however, sometimes you look at another organization and they adopted a new process that was very innovative at the time. You want to adopt the same process or the same technology. So if you will do it the same way they did it, it's not innovation. If you will come up with a new and innovative way, not only new is not innovative, okay? New and innovative way of doing it, for me, this is still innovation. Okay, Johan?
My question would be, what is, in your view, like, I'm talking about tools. So if I want to implement a culture of innovation in a company, in my startup or anywhere in my organization, what are the best tools I should use?
If you want to fix your car, what are the best tools you should use?
Well, I would look up the best mechanic.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And you trust this mechanic to pick and choose the right tools for the right job. Exactly that. I think there are two things here. First of all, tools are kind of very 70s. Today, it's less about the tools because there's abundance of tools. It's more about what is right for you. And what works for Google will not necessarily work for Apple, and what works for one startup will not necessarily work for another one. There's a whole culture of Me Too innovation. Everybody's doing hackathons, we'll do hackathons. Everybody's doing inspiration talks, we'll do inspiration talks. Everybody's doing design thinking, which is just a new version of brainstorming. We have to do it too. Okay. So I think in terms of tools, it's really depending on what you need. Sometimes, sometimes it's not even about the tool. Improvise something. Just be more focused on what is it exactly that you try to accomplish. I think that it's really, for me, because I have this deep interest in tools, and I learn almost every new tool that comes out. So for me, recommending tools or choosing tools for the right need is easy and kind of, I don't know, not automatic, but it's not the exciting part. Once you have a tool that you use successfully, then the expectation is that for you to be able to apply it more and more. Okay.
Yep.
But maybe one thing to say, kind of as a general comment to many of your questions, the way I perceive innovation is that it's something that is very specific. You don't always need to be innovative. You don't need to innovate with everything that you do. One of my scariest nightmares is to, when I imagine my dentist approach the chair with a wicked smile saying, I feel creative today. And I'm like, no, okay. So I think that you need to pick and choose. There's no reason to take risks and change everything every time you do something. So I think that that's one thing. And the other thing is that for me, innovation is philosophically, it's a very opportunistic effort. I don't care if it's internal or external, if you use this set of tool or that set of tool. At the end of the day, I want to see results. Not only that I want to see results, I want to see some kind of a self-sustained culture of innovation. I want to see you be able to innovate without paying consultants, without being depending on this platform or that tool set or this, okay? Because you know enough on how to do that. So for me, you find the right way for you, the right mix for you, open innovation and internal innovation and this and that, as long as you can show results. It's less romantic, I'm sorry, but yeah. Michelle,
how can you recognize the perfect moment for innovation? I mean, there are so many examples where innovative people here, it's too early now, that's not the right moment, we have to do first other things. How can you recognize the perfect moment, and how can you sell this idea of this has to be done now,
right?
Or this has to be started now?
Yeah, I don't recognize the perfect moment, because I honestly think that it's something I can identify only looking back. Instead, I focus on two things. One is to make sure that it's not the wrong moment. Okay. So now when I'm working with municipalities, the first question that I ask is, when is the next round of election? Okay. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I'll focus on is how to create the moment and not how to recognize it. And I think that it's not as hard as people think to create the moment. Okay. Sarah?
And Erez, we're past the top of the hour.
Right. Oh, sorry.
I'm just respectful of your time. If you have another few minutes, I'm fine, but I'm also fine to connect you all. And I would love to see this as the beginning of a new conversation, or a lot of new conversations. So that doesn't mean that end of this conversation is end of your conversation with Erez. It actually means that's an invitation to the beginning of a lot of new conversations.